Hello everyone and welcome to The Haunting Rose, where dark tales bloom and eerie whispers take root in your imagination. If you love spine-tingling stories that keep you on edge, you're in the perfect place. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to join our growing garden of fear, like the video to show your love for the macabre, and leave a comment below with your thoughts or your own chilling experiences. Your support keeps the darkness alive. Now let's step into the shadows together. I was 16 the first time I saw it. It was summer and we were bored. My friends and I, Matt, Casey, and Jess, spent most of our nights driving around town listening to music too loud and talking about all the things we were going to do once we were old enough to leave our small, suffocating town. That night, the plan had been to sneak into the quarry and drink the cheap vodka Matt had stolen from his dad's stash. But plans have a way of changing. The first thing we saw were the lights. A soft glow flickering in the distance like fireflies. We were cutting through the woods, heading to the quarry when Casey spotted them. "What the hell is that?" she asked, pointing through the trees. None of us knew. There wasn't supposed to be anything out here. No houses, no businesses, just miles of forest and the forgotten quarry. "Maybe someone's camping," Matt suggested, though he sounded unsure. "Camping with a light show?" Jess said, laughing. He had a point. The lights were too bright, too colorful, and they moved, twirling and shifting like they were dancing. We followed them. Of course we did. We were 16, stupid, and hungry for anything out of the ordinary. The woods seemed to thin out as we walked, the trees bending back as though making way for us. The air grew heavier, filled with the faint hum of music. Something old and lilting, the kind of tune you'd hear from a music box. And then we saw it. A carnival. It stood in the clearing, vibrant and alive, though there was no reason for it to be there. Ferris wheels, carousel horses, striped tents, and strings of lights that stretched into the sky. The music grew louder as we approached, blending with the distant laughter of children. But there were no children, no families, no sign of anyone entering or leaving. "Where the hell did this come from?" Jess whispered. Her voice carried an edge of unease. "Does it matter?" Matt grinned, already moving forward. "It's a carnival. Let's check it out." I hesitated. Something about it didn't feel right. The air was too still, the lights too perfect, and the laughter. It didn't sound quite human. But Casey grabbed my hand, pulling me along, and soon we were crossing the threshold. It smelled like sugar and smoke. The air was thick with the scent of caramel apples, cotton candy, and popcorn, but beneath it was something else. Something metallic and sharp, like rust or blood. We wandered past the ticket booth, which stood empty, the word "welcome" scrawled across its sign in looping red letters. No one stopped us. No one asked for money. The first attraction we saw was the carousel. It spun slowly, the horses rising and falling in rhythm. But as I got closer, I realized the horses weren't made of wood or plastic. Their eyes were too real, their teeth too sharp, and their bodies. They looked like they were breathing, their flanks heaving with each turn. "Do you see that?" I asked, but Matt was already climbing onto one of the horses. "Relax," he said, laughing. "It's just a ride." The music shifted as the carousel picked up speed, a low, grinding tune that set my teeth on edge. I watched Matt's face twist from excitement to confusion, then fear. The horse he was on seemed to move on its own, bucking and rearing as though trying to throw him off. He screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the music. I reached out to pull him off, but the carousel spun faster, and before I could grab him, he was gone, disappeared into the blur of colors and lights. "Matt!" Casey screamed, but there was no answer. The carousel slowed to a stop and his horse was empty. We ran, calling for Matt, but the carnival stretched endlessly in every direction. The tents loomed like monsters, their stripes shifting in the dim light. The laughter grew louder, mocking us. "Let's get out of here," Jess said, her voice trembling. "We'll find help." But there was no way out. The path we'd come in on was gone, replaced by more tents and attractions. The carnival had swallowed us whole. We found ourselves in front of a game booth. A man stood behind the counter, his face hidden beneath a porcelain mask painted with a grotesque grin. "Step right up," he said, his voice oily and thick. "Test your strength. Win a prize." Casey shook her head, backing away, but Jess stepped forward, her jaw set. "Where's our friend?" she demanded. The man tilted his head as though considering her question. Then he pointed to a row of prizes hanging above the counter. At first they looked like stuffed animals, but as I looked closer I realized they weren't toys. They were pieces of us. Matt's jacket, Casey's bracelet, my hair tie, and at the end of the row a pair of glasses that belonged to Jess. "Play the game," the man said, "and you'll get your friend back." Jess grabbed the mallet and slammed it down on the target. The bell rang and the man's grin widened. "Congratulations," he said. "Your prize is waiting." A door opened behind the booth, revealing a dark hallway. Jess hesitated but then stepped through. The door slammed shut behind her. She didn't come back. One by one we were being picked off. The carnival seemed to know our fears, our weaknesses, and it used them against us. Casey and I stuck together, but the attraction seemed to move, forcing us apart. I ended up in front of a mirror maze, its entrance beckoning with flashing lights. I tried to walk away, but my feet wouldn't obey. The maze pulled me in, its glass walls reflecting infinite versions of myself. At first, the reflections were normal, but then they began to change. My face twisted, my eyes hollowed out, my skin sagged and rotted. I turned to run, but the mirrors shifted, trapping me in a corridor that stretched forever. And then I saw him. Matt, or something that looked like him, stood at the end of the corridor. His eyes were blank, his mouth slack. "Help me," he whispered, but his voice wasn't his own. It was layered, overlapping, as though 100 voices were speaking through him. I ran. By some miracle, I found Casey near the Ferris wheel. She was crying, her hands covered in blood. "It's Jess," she sobbed. She's gone." We didn't speak after that. We just ran, weaving through the tents and attractions, ignoring the voices that called to us. The carnival fought to keep us, its lights dimming and flickering, its music warping into a cacophony of screams. Finally, we saw it, the edge of the woods, the path that would lead us back to the real world. We sprinted toward it, but as we crossed the threshold, I felt something cold brush against my back. A final reminder that we were leaving a part of ourselves behind. Casey never spoke about that night. She moved away a year later, and I haven't seen her since. As for me, I tried to forget, but the memories won't let me. The carnival left its mark on me, on both of us. Sometimes I hear the music in my dreams, and when I wake up, I can still smell the sugar and smoke. It's been 13 years since that night. And tonight, the lights are back. When I first met Jamie, I didn't think much of him. He was quiet, kept to himself, and had a disheveled, perpetually exhausted look about him. Not that I blamed him. Freshman year in college was stressful for everyone. I figured he was just another socially awkward kid adjusting to dorm life like so many others. Besides, I wasn't the most outgoing person either. We exchanged the bare minimum pleasantries when we moved into our dorm room, then went about our separate routines. The dorm itself wasn't anything special. 2 beds, 2 desks, and a shared closet, all crammed into a small space. It was dimly lit, with an overhead light that buzzed faintly, and the walls were painted an uninviting off-white. The hallway outside was long, narrow, and eerily quiet at night, save for the occasional echo of footsteps or muffled voices. At first, I didn't mind Jamie's odd quirks. He didn't seem to have a lot of stuff, and he spent most of his time at his desk or lying on his bed, staring at the ceiling. He never left the room after dark, which I assumed was just his way of avoiding late-night socializing or partying. But as the weeks went on, I began to notice things. Jamie had rules. Rules he didn't tell me about directly but made clear through his behavior. The most obvious one was the door. It had to be locked at night. Not just closed, not just latched, locked. Every night before he turned in, Jamie would double-check the lock, twisting it back and forth until it clicked multiple times. You good there?" I asked one night as I watched him fidget with the knob. He didn't look at me. "It has to stay locked." "Yeah, man, I get it. But like, why? This place is pretty secure." He paused, his hands still on the lock. For a moment, I thought he might actually answer, but he just muttered, "Just don't open it. Not at night." That was the first time I felt uneasy around him. The first weird thing happened about 2 weeks into the semester. I'd stayed up late working on an essay, the glow of my laptop screen the only light in the room. Jamie was already in bed, his back to me, wrapped tightly in his blanket. The clock on my desk read 1:47 a.m. when I heard it. A faint scratching noise coming from the door. At first, I thought it was my imagination. The dorms were old and weird noises were par for the course. But then it happened again, louder this time. Scratch, scratch, scratch. I froze, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Did you hear that? I whispered. Jamie didn't move. Ignore it, he said, his voice muffled by the blanket. What is it? Just ignore it. The scratching continued for what felt like an eternity before it finally stopped. I stared at the door, half expecting it to burst open, but nothing happened. Eventually, I convinced myself it was just some raccoon or stray animal outside. But Jamie's reaction stuck with me. Jamie's bedtime rituals became harder to ignore after that. Every night, before turning out the light, he would mutter under his breath, his hands moving in strange, deliberate patterns. Sometimes it looked like he was crossing himself, but other times it was more complex. Gestures I didn't recognize. One night I asked him about it. Jamie, what are you doing? He glanced at me, his face pale and drawn. It's just something I do to sleep better. Does it work? Sometimes. That was all he said. The whispering started a few nights later. It was faint at first, so quiet I wasn't sure if I was imagining it. But as the nights went on, it grew louder, soft, urgent voices just outside the door. One night I couldn't take it anymore. I got up and pressed my ear to the door. Hello. I called out. The whispers stopped immediately. I unlocked the door and opened it just a crack, peering into the dimly lit hallway. It was empty. The air felt colder than usual, and the faint scent of mildew tickled my nose. I quickly shut the door and locked it again, my heart racing. When I turned around, Jamie was sitting up in bed, staring at me. Why did you do that? He asked, his voice trembling. I was just checking. Don't open the door at night, he said, cutting me off. Ever. I started digging into Jamie's past out of sheer desperation. He wasn't going to tell me anything, so I had to find out on my own. I asked around, trying to piece together his story from snippets of gossip and vague comments. What I learned was disturbing. Jamie had been in a different dorm the previous year, but he'd requested a transfer halfway through the semester. No one knew why, but there were rumors. Whispers about strange noises, missing items, and an incident where Jamie had been found in the common area, trembling and incoherent. One night, while Jamie was out at class, I searched his side of the room. I felt guilty, but my fear outweighed my conscience. Tucked beneath his mattress, I found a small leather-bound journal. The entries were scrawled in messy handwriting, each one more frantic than the last. It knows I'm here. I can hear it scratching again. Why won't it leave me alone? I told the RA, but she doesn't believe me. No one does. They think I'm crazy. It doesn't like the light. Keep the light on. Keep the door locked. The final entry sent a chill down my spine. If you're reading this, it's already too late. The night it all came to a head, the scratching was louder than ever. It wasn't just at the door anymore. It was at the walls, the ceiling, everywhere. Jamie sat on his bed, rocking back and forth, his hands pressed over his ears. We have to get out of here, I said, grabbing my phone and keys. Jamie shook his head violently. No, we can't leave. It's worse outside. What are you talking about? Jamie, we're not safe here. He looked at me, his eyes wide and bloodshot. We're not safe anywhere. The lights flickered and the room plunged into darkness. That's when I heard it. A low, guttural growl that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The air grew thick, almost suffocating, and the temperature plummeted. Something slammed against the door hard enough to make the frame shudder. Jamie screamed, curling into a ball on his bed. I grabbed the desk lamp and swung it toward the door, desperate for any kind of weapon. The growling grew louder, closer, and then silence. The lights flickered back on and the room was empty. The door was intact, the walls unmarked. But the feeling of dread lingered, heavy and oppressive. Jamie left the next day. He didn't say goodbye, didn't explain, he just packed his things and disappeared. I stayed in the dorm for a few more weeks, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The whispers continued, the scratching returned, and my sleep was plagued by nightmares. Eventually, I transferred to a different dorm. I never saw Jamie again, but sometimes, late at night, I think about that journal and the thing that stalked him. And sometimes I hear scratching at my door. When Michael and I moved into our first home as newlyweds, it felt like a dream come true. The house was a cozy two-story place with creaky wooden floors, a stone fireplace, and a garden that bloomed with wildflowers in the spring. It wasn't perfect. It had its quirks, like an old plumbing system and drafty windows, but we loved its charm. The mirror came into our lives a few months after we settled in. We found it at an estate sale on a whim. It was beautiful, a tall antique mirror with an intricately carved mahogany frame. The silvering on the glass had faded slightly, giving it a vintage patina that seemed to hold secrets of the past. "We have to get it," Michael had said, running his hand along the carved frame. "It's perfect for the hallway." I wasn't entirely sold on the idea. Something about the mirror made me uneasy, though I couldn't put my finger on why. But Michael loved it, and we were still in that newlywed phase where every decision felt like a shared adventure, so I agreed. We hung it in the hallway upstairs, right outside our bedroom. For the first few weeks, the mirror was just a mirror. I barely noticed it as I passed by on my way to the bathroom or the guest room. But one night as I was heading to bed, something caught my eye. I stopped mid-step, staring into the glass. The reflection showed me standing there, tired and slightly disheveled after a long day. But something was off. The hallway behind me in the reflection seemed darker than it should have been, the shadows deeper, almost alive. I shook my head, chalking it up to my imagination, and went to bed. That was the first time. The whisper started a week later. I was alone in the house. Michael had gone out for drinks with friends. I was in the bedroom folding laundry when I heard it. A soft, almost inaudible murmuring. I froze, straining to hear. It seemed to be coming from the hallway. "Michael?" I called out, even though I knew he wasn't home. The murmuring stopped. Cautiously, I stepped into the hallway. The mirror stood at the far end, its surface gleaming faintly in the dim light. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I approached it. "Hello," I whispered, my voice trembling. The mirror stared back at me, silent and still. But as I turned to walk away, I could have sworn I heard it again, a faint, mocking laugh. It wasn't long before Michael noticed it too. "Have you ever felt like," he began one evening, trailing off as we sat on the couch. "Like what? Like the mirror's watching us?" I felt a chill crawl up my spine. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, glancing toward the stairs. "I don't know. It's probably nothing. Just, sometimes when I walk past it I think I see something move. But when I look, there's nothing there." I nodded, swallowing hard. "Yeah. Me too." From that point on, the mirror became impossible to ignore. At first, the distortions were subtle, barely perceptible shifts in the reflection, like a shadow flitting across the glass. But they grew more pronounced. One night, as I brushed my hair in front of the bedroom mirror, I glanced toward the hallway. In the antique mirror, my reflection stood perfectly still, even though my hands were moving. I froze, staring in disbelief. The reflection tilted its head, ever so slightly, and smiled. I screamed. Michael came running, but by the time he arrived, the mirror showed nothing unusual. Things escalated quickly after that. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. The reflections became bolder, moving when we weren't, their actions subtly different from ours. One night, I dreamt I was standing in front of the mirror, but instead of seeing my reflection, I saw another version of myself. Her face was twisted in a cruel grin, her eyes dark and empty. She reached out, her hand pressing against the glass, and I woke up in a cold sweat. Michael admitted he'd been having similar dreams. "We need to get rid of it," I said one morning, my voice shaking. Michael nodded. "I'll take it to the dump tomorrow." But when we tried to move the mirror, it wouldn't budge. It was as if it had fused with the wall. The night it all came to a head, Michael and I were lying in bed, too afraid to sleep. The house was eerily silent, save for the occasional creak of the floorboards. Then we heard it, a soft knock. It came from the hallway, from the mirror. Michael grabbed a baseball bat from under the bed, motioning for me to stay put. He crept toward the door, opening it slowly. "What the hell?" he whispered. I followed, unable to stay behind. In the mirror, our reflections were no longer reflections. They were standing there on the other side of the glass, staring at us. Their faces were pale and distorted, their eyes black pits. Michael raised the bat, ready to smash the mirror, but his reflection moved faster. It slammed its hands against the glass, and the mirror shook violently. The room filled with a deafening roar, the sound of shattering glass and 1,000 whispered voices all at once. Before I could react, Michael's doppelganger stepped through the glass. It looked like him, but its movements were jerky, inhuman. It lunged at Michael, knocking the bat from his hands. I screamed, grabbing a lamp and swinging it at the thing, but it barely flinched. My own reflection was clawing at the glass, trying to break through. I could see her mouth moving, whispering words I couldn't hear. "Run!" Michael shouted, struggling against his twisted double. But I couldn't leave him. I grabbed the bat and swung with all my strength, shattering the mirror. For a moment, everything went silent. Then the glass fell away, revealing darkness, an endless void where the wall should have been. The last thing I remember is being pulled into that darkness, my doppelganger's hand wrapped around my wrist. When I woke up, I was lying on the floor of our bedroom. The mirror was gone and Michael was sitting beside me, his face pale and drawn. "It's over," he said, his voice hollow. "But sometimes when I look in the bathroom mirror, I catch a glimpse of her, my other self. He's still there watching, waiting." It started as a dare. A stupid, reckless dare. We were 5 college friends with too much time and not enough sense. Me, Alex, my roommate Tyler, Emma, Josh, and Lisa. That Friday night, we were crammed into Tyler's dorm room, the air thick with pizza grease and bad ideas, scrolling through Reddit threads about urban legends and conspiracy theories. It was Lisa who brought up the black veil. "Ever heard of it?" she asked, leaning forward, her voice low and conspiratorial. Josh rolled his eyes. "What is it? Another cursed website or something?" Lisa smirked. "Something like that. Supposedly, it's this hidden part of the dark web that shows you the truth. People say if you watch long enough, you'll see stuff you're not supposed to, like government cover-ups, secret experiments, even," her voice dropped to a whisper, "murders." Tyler laughed, leaning back in his chair. "Sounds like BS." But I could see the spark in his eyes. Tyler thrived on pushing boundaries. Emma, the skeptic of the group, crossed her arms. "If it's on the dark web, it's probably just a scam. Or worse, illegal." "Come on," Tyler said, grinning. "What's the harm in looking?" We found the link buried in a thread on a forum already teetering on the edge of legality. It wasn't easy to access. We had to download a Tor browser, navigate through layers of cryptic links, and disable every shred of antivirus software on Tyler's laptop. The site's landing page was simple, almost innocuous. A black screen with the words "The Black Veil" written in flickering white text. Beneath it was a single button. "Enter the veil." "This is so stupid," Emma muttered, but she didn't leave. Tyler clicked the button. The screen went dark for a moment, then a live stream loaded. The feed showed an empty room, dimly lit by a single swinging bulb. Shadows pooled in the corners, and the sound of faint static buzzed through the laptop speakers. "What is this?" Josh asked, leaning closer. The chat on the side of the screen was alive with messages. New ones. "They're in. Welcome to the truth. They're watching." "Creepy," Lisa whispered. Tyler typed into the chat. "What is this?" For a moment nothing happened. Then a reply appeared. "Watch and see." The stream flickered and the empty room was replaced by a new scene. A woman sitting at a kitchen table. She was crying, her hands clutching a photograph. "Is this live?" Emma asked, her voice tinged with unease. Before anyone could answer, the camera zoomed in on the woman's face. Her tears glistened in the dim light, and she whispered something we couldn't make out. Then abruptly she froze. Her head snapped toward the camera, her eyes wide with terror. "What the hell?" Josh muttered. The screen went black again. The chat exploded. He saw them. Too late now. "They're coming." We sat in stunned silence, the unease in the room palpable. "Okay, fun's over," Emma said, reaching for the laptop. "Let's close this." She froze, her face going pale. "What?" Tyler asked. Emma pointed at the screen. The camera feed had returned, but this time it showed us. We were on the stream. The webcam light on Tyler's laptop blinked green. "No. No way," Tyler said, slamming the laptop shut. But the screen stayed on, the image of our stunned faces frozen in place. A message appeared in the chat. "Welcome to the show." Lisa let out a nervous laugh. "It's a prank, right? Someone hacked us." But then the voices started. At first it was a low murmur, like someone whispering directly into our ears. The sound didn't come from the laptop. It was everywhere, surrounding us. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. Everyone nodded, their faces pale. The whispers grew louder, forming words. "Stay. Watch." Tyler tried shutting the laptop down, pulling the plug, even yanking the battery out, but nothing worked. The stream continued, and the chat erupted in laughter. You can't leave. It's already begun. Confess. The next scene on the stream showed a familiar setting, Tyler's dorm room. But this wasn't live. It was a recording. The camera angle was different, as if someone had been watching us the entire time. What the hell? Tyler muttered. The video played snippets of our conversation from earlier, but the audio was distorted, twisting our words into things we hadn't said. What is this? Lisa whispered, her voice trembling. The stream cut to another scene. This time it was Lisa, alone in her apartment. The footage was grainy but unmistakable. She was arguing with someone, her ex-boyfriend, I realized, and then the screen froze on her face, twisted in rage. I didn't do that, Lisa stammered. That's not how it happened. But the chat disagreed. Liar. We see you. Tell the truth. The stream began to play out each of our lives, distorting moments, twisting memories. Josh's private texts were displayed on screen, revealing cruel things he'd said about Emma behind her back. Emma's browser history flashed across the feed, exposing her darkest curiosities. Each revelation was met with judgment in the chat. Shame. They deserve it. No secrets in the veil. The whispers grew louder, becoming a chorus of voices, and the room felt colder, the shadows deeper. I can't take this, Josh said, pacing frantically. We need to call someone. The police, the IT department, anyone. But our phones were dead. Every device in the room was unresponsive except for the laptop. As the hours dragged on, the stream began to control our environment. The lights flickered, the air thickened with an unplaceable stench, and the whispers turned into screams. The final scene on the stream was the most horrifying. It showed us 5 bodies slumped in the dorm room, lifeless, pale, and still. No, Emma whispered, tears streaming down her face. That's not real. That's not real. The chat delivered the final message. The veil takes what it's owed. One by one, my friends disappeared. First Josh, then Lisa, then Emma. Each time, the screen would flicker and they'd vanish, leaving only an empty chair behind. Tyler and I were the last. I'm not going out like this, he said, grabbing the laptop and smashing it against the wall. But the stream continued, now showing only him and me. Tyler screamed as the shadows closed in, dragging him into the darkness. Now it's just me. The stream is still running. The chat is still alive, watching, waiting. And I know it's only a matter of time before the veil takes me too. I've always been good with computers. Too good, maybe. It started innocently enough. Messing around with code in high school, cracking into unsecured Wi-Fi networks to impress my friends, hacking video games to unlock features for fun. By college, I was diving deeper into the digital underworld. Curiosity and arrogance drove me to explore the dark web. I told myself it was harmless, just a digital playground where I could test my skills. But some doors should never be opened. That night, I was sitting at my desk in the dim light of my room, the glow of my monitors illuminating stacks of energy drink cans and empty chip bags. The hum of my computer was soothing as I browsed a darknet forum, searching for the kind of secrets that only existed in the digital abyss. I stumbled across a post with the title, "Enter if you dare, the Red Room." I had heard whispers about red rooms before. Live-stream torture shows where anonymous users could bid to control the fates of victims. Most people dismissed them as urban legends, horror stories crafted to scare people away from the dark web. But the link was there, right in front of me. My cursor hovered over it. I hesitated for a moment, then clicked. What loaded was a plain black screen with a single blinking line of text. "Do you wish to proceed?" I typed, "Yes." The screen filled with cascading lines of code. My heart raced as I watched, a mixture of excitement and dread bubbling in my chest. I wasn't entirely sure what I was expecting. Some elaborate hoax, maybe. But then the stream began. The video feed was grainy, the kind of low-quality resolution you'd expect from an old security camera. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, its weak light flickering sporadically. The room was small, its walls bare concrete stained with dark streaks. Chains hung from the ceiling, clinking faintly as they swayed. At first the room was empty. Then a man was dragged into view. He was blindfolded and gagged, his wrists bound behind him with zip ties. His muffled cries sent a chill down my spine. 2 figures in black masks and gloves followed, dragging him to the center of the room and securing him to the chains. The chat on the side of the screen lit up. Here, let's start. Who's bidding first? My stomach churned. This was real. I should have exited right then, slammed my laptop shut and walked away. But I couldn't. My hands trembled as I watched, my brain struggling to process the horror unfolding on my screen. The masked figures stepped out of view and the camera zoomed in on the man. The angle shifted and for the first time I saw his face. It was Kyle. Kyle was my best friend. We'd been roommates in college, partners in crime for every prank and late-night gaming session. I couldn't mistake that messy blonde hair, the scar on his chin from when he fell off his skateboard freshman year. I froze. My breath hitched. No, I whispered. This can't be real. But it was. I scrambled to type into the chat. Stop this. Let him go. The chat replied almost instantly. Welcome, user _Alex123. Glad you could join us. Place your bid. My blood ran cold. That was my username. Not just my dark web alias. I'd used it on a private forum, a username I'd created years ago and never shared with anyone. I frantically scanned the room. My blinds were drawn, my door locked. No one could see me, but I felt exposed, like 1,000 eyes were drilling into me. I tried to leave the site, but my browser was unresponsive. My mouse wouldn't move, my keyboard refused to type. The stream continued, unrelenting, the sound of Kyle's muffled cries cutting through the static. Suddenly my phone buzzed. A text message. Don't try to leave. Watch. My hands shook as I opened the message. The number was unknown. Another text came through seconds later. If you log off, Kyle dies. I watched in helpless terror as the masked figures returned. They carried tools, blades, pliers, and something that looked like a cattle prod. The chat was alive with commands. Use the knife. Cut his arm. Shock him. One of the masked figures held up a phone, seemingly reading the instructions. They nodded and moved toward Kyle, who thrashed against his bonds, screaming behind the gag. Stop. I yelled at my screen, my voice cracking. Please stop. The figure hesitated, then turned to face the camera. Slowly they raised their gloved hand and waved. The next hour was a blur of horror. Every time I tried to close the stream or shut off my computer, it wouldn't let me. The texts kept coming, each one more chilling than the last. We see you. Stay where you are. Don't call anyone. The sounds of Kyle's screams echoed in my head, even when I tried to cover my ears. Then the screen went black. For a moment I thought it was over. But a new feed appeared. A live video of my own room. The camera angle was perfect, showing me sitting at my desk, pale and shaking. I turned around, searching for the source, but there was no camera there. The chat exploded. There he is. Your turn. Let's play. A voice crackled through my speakers. Low, distorted, and inhuman. Alex, if you leave, Kyle dies. If you stay, you take his place. I don't remember how long I sat there, frozen in terror. Hours maybe. My mind raced, searching for a way out. Then Kyle spoke. His voice was weak, broken, but clear. Alex, please. I looked back at the screen. The masked figure stood next to him, holding a knife to his throat. The chat waited, hungry for my response. And then I understood. This wasn't just about Kyle. It was about control. About breaking me. I took a deep breath, tears streaming down my face, and typed. Take me instead. The screen went dark. I woke up in my room hours later, slumped over my desk. The stream was gone, the link erased from my browser history. My phone was blank. No texts, no calls. But Kyle was missing. I filed a police report, desperate for answers, but they found nothing. No signs of struggle, no evidence he'd ever been taken. And every night since, I hear whispers through my speakers, faint and mocking. We're still watching. I don't know how to begin this. There's no easy way to explain what happened, no simple way to tell you how a few lines of code, just a harmless download, a program from the dark web, turned my life into a waking nightmare. But if you're reading this, you need to know. It's not just a bad story. It's a warning. It started innocently enough. I was a software engineering student, pulling all-nighters in my dimly lit dorm room, barely able to focus on anything besides my assignments. The blinking lights from my monitors were my only company as the darkness of the room pressed in. The hum of the computer and the occasional crack of my joints were the only sounds. I was deep into a final project when I stumbled upon the program. It was a link in a forum, one I wasn't supposed to be browsing, but curiosity always got the better of me. I had been looking for ways to optimize some of my code, searching for more efficient algorithms when I saw it. The ultimate compiler. The description was vague but tantalizing. Unlock the power of code like never before. Perfect for advanced users. Unleash your true potential. The fact that it was shared in a dark web forum only added to its allure. I thought to myself, why not? I had been working long hours on a project and was desperate for any edge, something to save time and make my work stand out. The download was quick. A single .exe file, innocuous enough to pass the basic scan from my antivirus software. But I should have known better. The program ran smoothly at first. It was intuitive, beautifully designed even. I began using it for my coding, incorporating it into my project. But soon something wasn't right. It started with small glitches on the screen that I brushed off as minor bugs. Lines of code would appear distorted, shimmering in ways that didn't make sense. My mouse would hover over commands and they would change on their own as if the program had a mind of its own. But the real issue didn't manifest until I left my desk for the night. I had been up for hours working non-stop. It was late or maybe early. Time had stopped making sense to me. I took a break, stretched, and walked away from the screen. When I returned, the program was open on my desktop. I hadn't left it open. I distinctly remember closing it. But there it was, and the lines of code on the screen were different. It was like someone, or something, had been working on the program while I was away. It wasn't just random code either. It was specific. There were commands written in a language I didn't recognize, and beneath them a single sentence. I see you. I froze, staring at the screen. A wave of cold washed over me and I quickly closed the program, dismissing it as a glitch. But as I shut the laptop, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The days after that passed in a blur, with the program becoming an ever-present part of my life. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time I worked, it lingered in the background. The glitches grew worse. Distorted, flickering images started appearing on my screen. Faces, strange, shadowed faces, would flash for a split second before disappearing. The shadows in the corners of my room seemed darker, more oppressive. And I began seeing things that weren't there. One night, as I sat coding in the dark, I saw something in my peripheral vision. A figure, just a flicker like a person standing in the doorway. But when I turned my head, nothing was there. At first, I thought it was exhaustion, stress, lack of sleep. But it didn't stop. The next night, I saw it again, this time closer. A dark shape standing in the corner of my room, barely visible in the shadows. I blinked and it was gone. But the most disturbing part? My laptop was on and the program had opened itself. This time it wasn't just a message on the screen. A line of code, deliberate, purposeful, was written across the entire page. I see you, Alex. You cannot escape. I was losing it. I knew I was. There was no other explanation for what was happening. But as the days passed, it became harder to deny what was real. My reality was twisting, warping, and I couldn't tell where the code ended and the world began. My friends noticed. They told me I looked tired, too pale, that I was acting strange. But they didn't understand. They hadn't seen what I'd seen. The whispers started. I would hear soft voices at night, just out of reach, muffled through the hum of my computer. It was like they were calling me, repeating my name, whispering phrases I couldn't understand. Every time I tried to get up, I felt as if something was pulling me back to the screen. The program had taken over my life. Then it started predicting things. One night, I decided to shut it down once and for all. I was determined to rid myself of this madness. But when I sat down to do it, the program had already anticipated my move. It began typing on its own, faster than I could react, lines of code forming in real time. You want to leave, but you can't. Not anymore. I know what's coming. I couldn't stop it. The program controlled everything. It knew things about me that no one else could. It knew my darkest secrets, my past. And then it started manipulating the physical world. The lights in my room flickered and dimmed, then went out completely. The room became impossibly cold and I felt the weight of someone, pressing against me, watching. My eyes darted back to the screen where the program had revealed something that made my blood run cold. A line of code appeared. You should have stayed away. I tried to close the program again, but it wouldn't let me. It was too late. The curse had already begun. The following days were a blur of terror. I couldn't sleep, couldn't think. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the program, its glowing lines of code burning into my vision. The shadows grew more tangible, following me even when I left my room. And then it happened. I was sitting in class when the screen on my laptop flashed. I didn't even have the program open, but it appeared there anyway, mocking me with its cold, calculated gaze. It's time to pay the price. The next moment, everything went black. I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing. The screen lit up with a single text message from an unknown number. You've done it now. You opened the door. There's no way back. The program didn't just control my reality. It controlled me. Every line I wrote, every line of code I created only strengthened its grip. I wasn't just coding anymore. I was feeding it. It was alive and it was growing. I realized too late that the program was never just a tool. It was a curse. A digital entity that had crossed over from the depths of the dark web and into my world. And now it was too late to escape. Every time I tried, it stopped me. Every time I ran, it followed. The shadows were always there watching. I'm trapped and so are you. If you've made it this far, I'm sorry. But remember, there is no escape once you've crossed the line. You can never outrun the cursed code. It knows you too. Thank you for listening to The Haunting Rose, where dark tales find their bloom. If you have a story you'd like me to share, I'd love to hear it. Reach out to me via the email in the video description. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment with your thoughts. Your support keeps these haunting stories alive. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and let the shadows guide you.